The alley smelled of stale coffee and regret, but HOA Karen's voice cut through it like a chainsaw through butter. "You think you can ignore my fines and get away with it?" she bellowed, her jowls quivering with righteous fury. She stood, a mountain of indignation, in the fading light of a city alley, her floral muumuu straining against her frame as she jabbed a meaty finger at the two figures before her. They were too calm, she thought, for people who'd just been served a verbal eviction notice by the queen of the neighborhood. HOA Karen, self-appointed enforcer of rules nobody voted for, had spent years terrorizing her block with petty fines for untrimmed hedges, unapproved paint colors, and, in this case, a car parked 2 inches over the line. She'd called the cops, expecting them to drag these lowlifes away. But the air felt wrong, heavy with a tension she couldn't name. "You're nobody," she spat, her voice dripping with contempt. "I own this street. You'll pay every cent of that fine, or I'll have your car towed to the moon." The man and woman before her exchanged a glance, their faces unreadable. The man, lean with a jawline sharp enough to cut glass, adjusted his sunglasses despite the dusk. The woman, her hair pulled back in a tight bun, stood with a stillness that made Karen's skin prickle. "Ma'am," the man said, his voice low and measured, "you might want to rethink this." Karen snorted, her double chin wobbling. "Rethink? I don't rethink. I enforce." She waved her phone, already dialing 911 for the second time that day. "You'll see what happens when you mess with me." The alley wasn't empty. A nervous bystander, a young guy named Jamal who'd been taking out his trash, lingered near a dumpster, his phone half raised as if debating whether to record. Karen shot him a glare. "What are you looking at, kid? Mind your business, or you're next." Jamal shrank back, but didn't leave. Something about the two strangers kept him rooted, something in their quiet confidence that screamed trouble for Karen. She didn't notice. She never did. HOA Karen had built her empire on not noticing other people's feelings, their struggles, the way her neighbors flinched when she stormed by. Her world was fines, rules, and power, and she wielded it like a sledgehammer. For years, she'd bullied the block into submission, slapping liens on homes for minor infractions, calling cops on kids for skateboarding, even reporting a single mother for unsightly laundry on her balcony. Nobody fought back. Nobody dared. Until today, the woman stepped forward, her boots clicking on the cracked pavement. "Ms. Nguyen," she said, using Karen's real name with a precision that made her flinch, "we're not here about your fines." Karen blinked, thrown off. "How do you know my name?" she demanded, her voice losing a fraction of its bravado. The man reached into his jacket, slow and deliberate, pulling out a badge that gleamed even in the dim light. "Special Agent Carter, FBI? This is Special Agent Ruiz. We've been watching you for a while." The alley seemed to shrink, the walls closing in as Karen's smug grin faltered. "Watching me?" she scoffed, but her voice cracked. "For what? Doing my job? Keeping this dump civilized?" Agent Ruiz's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Your job," she said, "seems to involve extortion, harassment, and falsifying HOA records. Did you think nobody would notice?" Karen's face turned the color of spoiled milk. That's ridiculous," she stammered. "I'm the president of the HOA. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," Carter said, his tone almost bored. "But you've never been good at that, have you?" Jamal, still by the dumpster, couldn't help but let out a choked laugh. Karen whipped around, her eyes blazing. "You think this is funny?" she shrieked. "I'll have you evicted, you little—" "Enough!" Ruiz cut in, her voice like a whip. She pulled out a folder, its edges worn but official-looking, and flipped it open. 6 complaints of harassment. 3 forged signatures on HOA documents. And a nice little side hustle skimming dues to fund your neighborhood beautification projects. Like that $10,000 gazebo nobody asked for. Karen's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. "You can't prove anything," she whispered, but her hands shook as she clutched her phone. "Oh, we can," Carter said. He nodded toward a black SUV parked at the alley's mouth, its tinted windows hiding whoever was inside. "We've got statements from your neighbors, bank records, even your own emails. You really should have used a better password than Queen Karen 123. The weight of it hit her then, heavy as the fines she'd slung at others. Her empire, her rules, her power, it was crumbling, and she'd built the trap herself. She'd called the cops, thinking she'd win, but the cops weren't coming. These agents had been waiting, watching, letting her dig her own grave with every nasty word and forged document. "Tu didn't mean," she started, but the words dissolved into a whimper. She looked around, desperate for an ally, but Jamal was now openly filming, his face a mix of shock and glee. The alley, her kingdom, offered no mercy. Ruiz stepped closer, her voice softening but not kind. "You've spent years making people feel small, Ms. Nguyen. You thought you were untouchable. But every fine you wrote, every threat you made, left a trail. And trails lead somewhere." Karen's knees buckled, and she sank onto a crate, her muumuu pooling around her like a deflated balloon. "I was just protecting the neighborhood," she mumbled, but even she didn't believe it. Carter shook his head. "Protecting yourself, maybe, but not anymore." He pulled out a pair of cuffs, the metal glinting coldly. "Hoa Nguyen, you're under arrest for fraud, extortion, and abuse of power." As the cuffs clicked around her wrists, Karen's mind raced, replaying every fine, every sneer, every time she'd laughed at someone's plea. She'd thought she was the hunter, but she'd been the prey all along. The neighbors she'd tormented, Jamal, the single mother, the old man with the untrimmed lawn, they'd all talked. They'd all fought back in quiet ways, slipping evidence to the feds, waiting for this moment. Jamal lowered his phone, his voice steady despite the chaos. "You're done, Karen," he said, and for the first time, she saw the fire in his eyes, the same fire she'd ignored in everyone she'd stepped on. The SUV's door opened, and another agent stepped out, ready to take her away. Karen's head hung low, her empire reduced to a scrawled note on a dumpster and a pair of cuffs. The alley was silent now, save for the distant wail of a siren she'd called but would never save her. The neighbors would sleep better tonight. The block would breathe easier. And HOA Karen, the queen of fines, would face a judge who didn't care about her rules. Sometimes the world rights itself. Sometimes the bully falls. And sometimes the people you trample find their voice and their justice. The end.